Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. I got a question yesterday about production rates for one of the assets, and I really wanted to show you how I do some of the due diligence to better understand whether production is declining for a good reason or a bad reason. So, what I've done here, as you know, often I'll post production associated with like each asset. So I monitor about 30 assets in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and then I'll post the monthly production. So I take that from AER/Petronex for personal use, non-commercial use, and then I have a software that basically compares performance, does data analytics calculations. And so here I wanted to use an example to basically showcase how I look at things and if I freak out about production declines, for example, because one of the investors on Twitter, on X, was asking, well, what's going on here with the production decline at Leismer, for example? And so I really wanted to explain how I look at this. So what you see here, basically the software, what it does, it sorts the wells and compares on monthly basis. So what you see here is the number of the well that I allocate to, and then I make sure I compare the right well to the right well, so it has like the same designation and numbers. The other thing I do, I compare the well name to the previous well name again to make sure that the allocation is appropriate, and I compare apples to apples. Then what you see here is basically the monthly production in barrels per day for that individual well. So, for example, the best well for the month of September at Leismer Athabasca was producing 8,276 cubes per month. And the month before that, in August, that well was producing 8,707 cubes per month. And what you see here, I basically compare the difference between the two. So you see a decline of 431 cubes per month over month from August to September. The way I sorted this information here is that I want to focus on really understanding what types of wells are declining and what's been taking kind of place. So what you see here, I basically sorted them based on the production, the highest production to the lowest production. So the best well produced 8,276 cubes per month at Leismer, at Athabasca Leismer, and I monitor 66 producers, and the worst well produced 95 cubes per month. So you can see a big delta between the best performing well and the worst performing well. But that makes sense because as you kind of develop the steam chambers, as you grow your asset and the production declines on legacy wells, you will be seeing basically decaying production rates, which makes sense. But then they can bring another well online, let's say, from fresh reservoirs, right? And if it's in such good pay like the best reservoirs, then you get that uplift of maybe 8,000 cubes per month or maybe a little bit less. But here you can see big difference between the different basically productions per month per well. So now I make sure I compare the right wells. So I have those wells and those wells, and then I get the delta, which is the most important thing. What you see in columns O and P is that I basically convert the monthly production in cubes per day, in cubes per month, to daily production in barrels per day. And so obviously you can see here the best well right here produced produced that production of 1,735 barrels per day. And the previous month production in August, that well was producing about 1,766 barrels per day. And so that delta for me is very important, right? So we lost 31 barrels a day on average on that well. So minus 31. So to dig a little bit further, what I've done here is you can see basically a sum of the daily kind of production, I guess, on monthly basis through that conversion for the month of September. I picked the best 20 to 20 wells or so. So you can see cells 2 to 22. So I basically picked those wells. And the reason why I did that, I used 500 barrels per day as a cutoff for evaluating whether the best wells are getting hurt or the worst wells are getting hurt. Obviously, if you look at the overall production on those wells, that here, the 20 wells, you can see that they produce about 20,000 barrels a day, which is a big chunk of Athabasca's production. But then the bottom wells on that asset, right, they produce 6,847 barrels per day. So that's a big delta. And if we look at overall for the month of September, I see production of 26,859 barrels per day. Now, if you look at the previous month, so the month of August, you get production that's 27,563 barrels per day. And now we're basically comparing those, right? So when I looked at I looked also the top wells for the previous month. So the 20 wells for previous months. And so what I see here is basically 4 barrels difference. So the best wells continuing to perform well. And that what gives me kind of confidence that the issue is not in the new wells, in the newly drilled wells, because when you invest a lot of capex and you start drilling new wells, the worst thing that could happen to you is that now those wells start declining in addition to the legacy wells that you had. So basically what I see here is a very comparable production rate of, with difference of 4 barrels per day out of 20,016 to 20,012. So there is no big concern when it comes to that. And we can see basically the best wells on the deltas. If I pick, let's say, the top 10 wells or so, basically the difference is very minimal, right? So we have some wells that are increasing a little bit more production here, and we have some wells that are declining a little bit here. But in overall, in aggregate, we don't see a big difference. Now, what I've done here, I looked at basically if I sum the production for previous month, so September, and I look at the worst performing wells, then I get about 6,847 barrels per day. And if I do the same for the month of August, I get 7,546 barrels per day. Now that delta right here is about 700 barrels per day, and that's the difference between basically the monthly production. So in the month of September, the overall production was 26,859, and in the month of August it was 27,563. But now start thinking, let's say, if we get that production, if we, let's say, sum the month of September, so we do something like this, so sum all of that, and then we, let's say, add the best well. If, let's say, we drill a new well, so we get about 28,600 barrels per day. Now the asset can only handle 28,000 barrels per day. It cannot handle 28,594, because my understanding is that the central process facility was designed basically to handle 28,000 barrels a day, and previously it was designed to handle 24,000 barrels per day. And now what management communicated is that they're going to be kind of developing capabilities to produce oil up to 40,000 barrels per day, but that will require capex investment to get that number to 24,000 barrels per day. So what I basically think about this here is that we saw a decline of production of roughly in overall, like if we add those numbers here, so if we take that sum of column O, so the production for the month of September, minus sum of production for the month of August, the overall delta, what we get is about 700 barrels per day. And the 700 barrels decline really comes from the worst performing wells, not the best performing wells. And you can see the delta basically here. But then if they were to drill like a new well, then you have issues with maybe handling that emulsion basically, and the oil cut, separating the water and all that. So I guess long story short is that two points here to take away is that there's really nothing, it seems, based on this data, nothing to worry about when it comes to the decline from the good wells. You can see there's no abnormalities here. Everything looks kind of like it fluctuates around the standard deviation. And on the worst performing wells, the one of the wells that was, I think, the worst performing, I think the cut was about 100 barrels per day. see a minus 35 here. We can see a minus 29, a minus 40, minus, we can see plus 39, which is good, minus 82. So some production like kind of increases, some production declines, but in overall, it's within the standard deviation. So long story short, the goal for this exercise was to compare Leismer production differences between the month of September and the month of August. They produced a little bit less in the month of September, but the conclusion here, based on the data shared, is that we operate within the standard deviation of what's acceptable. And in my mind, there is not much kind of to worry about it. Of course, if we continue the trend continues where production declines month over month, and we see some wells failing and basically inability to sustain production, this is something to worry about. But I don't see it as the case right now. So we're in good shape. Thank you so much.